as I walked in the door, an individual that was here earlier, I guess he's left, stopped me and blamed me for everything wrong in government. And what I couldn't quite get in as he was railing against me is that I agreed with just about everything he said. And so my message here today, I just would like to say several things, and hopefully you'll listen to them. If you disagree, God bless you. If you agree, that's even better. Now, state government is a very difficult government to deal with, especially for people in upstate New York. Excuse me. Shh. I can't yell any louder. Especially for people in upstate New York, the philosophy of New York City and downstate is so foreign to the roots we have in upstate New York and central New York. It's just like night and day. I know in the southern tier there is now a movement to try to make New York upstate a separate state, or at least a separate region. When I got into office 23 years ago, there was a bill supported by Senator Randy Cool, and Randy Cool's bill was introduced every year. He then went to Congress. Now he's retired from Congress. And the reason is that the chances of a bill like that really happening without a constitutional convention are slim and none. And the first point I'd like you to remember, at least consider, to change things in New York State, there's an opportunity that only comes around every 20 years. And that is in next year's ballot, 2017, there will be a proposition on the ballot that says, should we have a constitutional convention? It's required to be on the ballot every 20 years. The reason it's not ever, or the only other way, is to get the legislature to pass a law that would call for a constitutional convention. Legislature hasn't done one, I think, since 1960-something. They're not going to do it. So if this is something that you want, if this is something that you want to have studied, it's got to be done this way, and you have a vote in 2017. Now, I'd like to give you both sides, and then I'll go on to the next point. I used to sit next to, for years, a great senator named John Markey. He was actually a staffer on the last Constitutional Convention. And what happened at that time is that people get elected to the Constitutional Convention as a delegate. You petition, just like if you're running for office, you get elected as a delegate. And what happened in the last one is that many of the delegates were staff members that were elected, were staff members of legislators, assembly people, senators. There were even some assembly and senators that were actually part of the commission. And they heard all the complaints, all the stuff that people wanted to change. And what happened was they put them all on the ballot in one proposition. So there was always something among this long constitutional amendment that people hated. So you had every special interest group arguing against the passage of the amendment that came out of the Constitutional Convention. So the process of this Constitutional Convention, if the item is passed next year, that's very important. As you're discussing this with others, make sure they understand that the process has to be such so that ordinary people can get on that convention and make some changes. And so that's with respect to a separate state. The SAFE Act, which obviously is a priority of yours, is something that was not only passed in a horrible way, in a night and day, after the governor was lobbying several senators to change their vote. It was a done deal in the Assembly. They actually wanted more things, like the micro-stamping and other such things. We made it more restricted. But several senators changed their votes at the last minute, and it happened by whatever lobbying the governor performed. So, the problem in changing the SAFE Act, and I'm being very frank, is that we can pass a bill in the Senate, even if we were to do that. It'll never pass in the Assembly, and if it passed both houses, this is the governor's signature legislation. He think now that his attorney, one of the attorneys in his office, got shot in the head, now he's thinking about other reforms of the gun laws. So the fact of the matter is, it's very difficult to do it. This year, there was an attempt to cut out parts of it that at least provide some relief, but it was botched up terribly. Now, the only way, in my judgment, that there's going to be a serious change, if it's not done by the court, it's going to be by a new, like John Katko just said, a gubernatorial election where you get somebody that understands about gun laws and about the Constitution and the like, because he is not going to change his mind. He thinks he's a hero for this particular piece of legislation. Now, I'm going to tell you my experience with guns and then weapons, or you may get a kick out of this. I was in the Air Force, and obviously I had to pass tests for gun safety and gun usage, and then I never owned a gun. I apologize to everybody here. I don't hunt, I don't fish, I go to the fish market when I want something. If I want some meat, I go to the store. I just never cared for doing that. My father was an avid hunter and fisherman. So, I got my son, I didn't know it, when he got to be 21 years of age, he went to Madison County to get a gun permit so he could get a carry permit, because remember Judge Mulroy would never sign it? Remember that? Oh, yeah. So my son, I didn't know anything about it. He had a carry permit. And he does like dealing with shooting practice and like target practice. So I go into Onondaga County, I file papers for a gun permit, a carry permit. And this was maybe 3 years ago. And a gun, when you could do this, was transferred from my son to me, one of his arsenal that he has at his house. And he gave me a handgun, and we went out shooting. We went to the Baldwinsville, there's a range out there. And so I'm there, and a couple other people with long rifles shooting something about a mile away on the hill that I couldn't even see. So my son, 20 yards away, puts up a target, and he shoots. He's got this nice circle around where you're supposed to hit. He changes it, puts it back, puts a target back on. I can't see any hits. So we go close to the target, and on the wooden frame at the bottom, I had a nice round pattern. And these guys that were firing are laughing, excuse me, their asses off, because I think they knew who I was. So I turned around and said, I don't know what you're laughing at. If you get hit here, it really, really hurts. So you may want to know why I fought against the SAFE Act, and even though I'm not a sportsman. And the fact of the matter is, the reason I voted against it, and still I'm trying to find ways to get rid of it, is that I can read. I can read. I can read the Constitution. I can read what it says, and any imbecile could read it if they chose to follow the law and the Constitution as it exists. So the key, as far as that bill is concerned, is a constitutional convention or getting rid of the governor who happens to be in office now. I want to thank many of you in this room, because when I was seeking the #1 spot in the Senate Majority Leader, I know that members of SCOPE and other organizations, pro-gun organizations, supported me, got most of the upstate representatives in my favor, and it was a very, very, very close vote. And I know some of you have already told me today that you're disappointed that I didn't get it, and so am I. But it didn't happen. But I'm going to continue my fight. I'm going to share with you a private conversation I had with His Eminence the Governor. The day after I got the vote, he called me and he says, "John, I'm really sorry you lost." And he said, "You would have made a great majority leader." So I said to him, "Do you think I'm a moron? I know that you were making calls on behalf of my opponent. I never did anything like that. Nothing like that." I said, "You're kidding me." And I started naming some names, and then he shut up. Now, 2 points that I'd like to make. Number one, if you're an independent branch of government, and you're a member of that independent branch, and you've got problems with the governor, many of his decisions, who are you going to support? Someone that the governor wants in office, or someone that the governor would go nuts that was in office because I don't kowtow to anything he says? And so that's the only thing I had to say to him. The vote went the way it went. Now let's get back to now, because this is one of the things I think is most important. Back in 2009 and 2010, the state of New York was governed totally by New York City. The Assembly has always been controlled by New York City. At that time, David Patterson was the governor, at least in name only, because he did not quite use a friend, but he was not a good governor. And the Senate majority was taken over by New York City Democrats. There were 32, which needed a majority, 32 Democrats. 23 of the 32 that were the majority were from New York City, not downstate. 23 from New York City. Others from Westchester County and downstate, some more liberal areas, and just a couple from upstate. During that 2-year period, the state increased taxes by $10 billion with a B dollars and increased spending by $10 billion with a B dollars. We've been trying to dig ourselves out of the hole since 2009, 2010. Now we're back in the same situation. We have Tom Libous had his problems, and he no longer is in the Senate. We now have 31 Republican senators and 1 Democrat whose conference is with us. If one person is sick or can't make it or whatever, we don't have the majority again. There's an election coming in November, and there's a deputy sheriff that's running on behalf of the Republicans, and a former Department of Motor Vehicles commissioner, a woman by the name of Fiala from Binghamton, is running against him for the Democrats. She supported the SAFE Act. She supported every liberal proposal that the governor came up with. The fact is, it's crucial for us to win that seat in order to have a little margin and going into next year's election. So, as the older gentleman who beat me up as I walked in the door, blaming everybody for anything. You're a Republican in name only. You're a liberal Democrat. You're no good, etc., etc. The fact of the matter is, we had some people that defected during the gun law vote. We had people defect on other liberal proposals. The fact of the matter is, if this ever was turned over back to New York City Democrats, you will see even worse situations. So, my point is, please think through the issue. Please don't put this, I don't know how long I'm going to be in the Senate. I'm an old man now. But I'm going to stick around. I got another year, and we'll see what happens next November. But I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, from somebody who has the same political philosophy as you do, if we ever let the New York City crowd take care of everything again, you'll have many more things to bitch about, including more taxes, more spending, and everything else, in view of the 2009-2010. So, that's what I have to say. I hope you agree with most of what I said. If you don't, that's fine. I've been married to my wife for 47 years. We dated 6 years before that. We don't agree on everything. And we still love each other. I'm not asking you to love me. Just think things through. If you agree with me, that's great. If you don't, that's your prerogative. With that said, I'd be happy to open the floor for any questions that you might have. Yes.
A month or two ago, Senator, the majority leader, as well as Senator Nozzolio and Senator Seward, had this nonsense with the Memorandum of Understanding, claiming that changes have been made to the New York SAFE Act, when indeed there is no change whatsoever to the New York SAFE Act. What is your position on that? Because I've actually heard you, I think I had heard you quoted as kind of saying nothing's changed. I don't know why they're saying that.
The question was that there was a memorandum of understanding rather than a law being passed to change the SAFE Act. Some colleagues in the Senate were saying that it's better, it does something. I didn't support that negotiation because I think in reality it is nothing. Unless the law is changed by a law, it's not effective at all. A memorandum of understanding is only three people agreeing on something that anybody can back out of. So, and I think that after this debate went on, after the memorandum of understanding was talked about, I think the governor even backed off of it, which should prove the point. So, I said it at the time, and I'll repeat it now, that I didn't think it meant a hoot. Yes?
John Defransisco, when rent control was up for renewal, why weren't we able to attach at least some portions of the SAFE Act to renewal of rent control?
I'll be done soon. I'll be done, then you can eat. Okay? I'll be done soon. The question was, when rent control was up this year, why couldn't that be used in the negotiations to make changes in the SAFE Act? You're very perceptive. It should have been. If you were in the Republican conferences, there were several people, including myself, that made that same argument. That we never are going to be in a better position than when New York is dying to get their rent control laws extended or modified some way. That's a negotiation. To get a budget, you have to have everybody agree. And if there's a point that you can't agree on, you can say whatever you want to say about Sheldon Silver, and I've said everything. But he would hold up the budget for months in order to get some things that he wanted done. So I think we should have. I was not happy that we didn't. But even with that said, I'm still concerned about losing the Republican majority because there are many things that we did stop over the course of these last few years that we cannot stop if we get into a New York City crowd who takes care of everything. But that's an excellent, excellent point. Yes?
First, I'd like to thank you for coming. And I want to thank you for all the efforts that you've made on behalf of people like me. My question is...
I should have given you the mic. He was saying a lot of nice stuff. No, but go ahead.
My question is, you mentioned the proposition that will be coming up. What are the chances of us obtaining a review of the Constitution of our state? And what are the chances that in a liberally dominated state as we are, that we will be able to effect a positive change that, or even will we be putting ourselves in a very dangerous, in a way that will be worse than it already is?
Excellent, excellent point. The reason I gave you the example of Senator Markey and how the cost was in the millions of the Constitutional Convention, and it ended up doing nothing because the delegates wired the final vote on the proposed constitutional change, so everybody hated it. The question went one step further, and it basically asked, how do we guarantee, number one, that we can get a full review of the Constitution, and number two, that being a liberal state, we might end up with a worse situation. There's no way to guarantee that. There's no way. You're right. It's a liberal state, and it's becoming more and more liberal. The city of Syracuse, I started in Syracuse politics 37 years ago. I was on the school board, city council, president of city council, during which time we had a Republican majority. Right now in the city of Syracuse, there's not one city elected official. The mayor, the controller, the auditor, the 7 judges, the 7 members of the school board, the city council, the 10, not one, not one. In fact, the Republicans don't even have candidates on 90% of the races. So you're right, we're moving so quickly into a territory where I don't know how we bring this back. I've seen over my 37 years in government, the pendulum swinging back and forth. I've got a feeling, and I'm maybe more hopeful than predicting that it's happening. I just think with 2 terms of this president, with Cuomo trying to get more liberal than de Blasio, who the fellow who harassed me correctly said is a communist. The fact of the matter is that that pendulum has gotten to the point. I hear more people nowadays getting engaged in the race this year. You got Hillary, which I would never have believed in a million years, starting to tank. You got them thinking about Biden, who is, well, he would not be a good president. You got a ton of candidates on the Republican side. I see Trump has balls on your t-shirt, that's great. But there's enough people talking seriously about the issues that I see there, at least nationally, there's a more conservative trend. And hopefully it's borne out in the next presidential election, and some local elections would be carried in by the more conservative trend. But there's no guarantee what can happen at a constitutional convention. Yes, sir.
You know, a few years back, when we started the Independence Party, we were going to have an initiative, a referendum. Now, how can we ever do that? Because you know the legislature is never going to give it to us. Is that something we can put on the ballot? And the second part of my question is, did they give you Bragman's desk underneath the staircase for being girl?
No, they gave me the second spot in the Senate. No, I was there with Bragman's situation. This was substantially different in that Bragman got lied to by the New York City crowd. Many of them said they were going to support Bragman. Bragman announced ahead of time that he had the votes, which gave Silver time to bribe the rest of those New York City crowd in some way to still support him. And as a result, what happened was he lost that election. This was different because we had the upstate votes. There were 5 people upstate, not New York City, that could have voted for me, and I believe should have voted for me. And all I needed was 2 votes. So it was a totally different thing. It was in the sense that it wasn't an upstate downstate battle. It was as much here because upstate chose somebody else as well. And again, I'm going to hasten to add this. It's not sour grapes that I'm talking about. I'm just talking practical politics. And at this point in time, it's much worse if the little leverage we have is lost and by having a Democrat majority. So, but initiative and referendum, his concern about it being more liberal, you got to have a certain number of petitions circulated and filed to get something on the ballot throughout the state to have a statewide initiative and referendum, even if it's in law. You know what it is, some of you have circulated petitions for candidates or circulated petitions for something. It's like murder going in rural areas to get enough votes. On the other hand, in New York City, if someone wanted a proposition on marrying your dog, I guess if they wanted to have a proposition on something like that or anything else, they could go on a corner in Times Square and get the number of petitions. You know, you got to have a balance upstate, but they can get their petitions on some crazy balance a hell of a lot easier. So until we get some more reasonable balance between more conservative people and the liberal crowd that's really in control of most things, it's going to be tough, even if you had an initiative and referendum, to change things. Rapidly, anyway. Okay? Last one. I don't have a son who broke his back, but I have a wife that would like to see me at some point, because this is my third stop. Yes? I think she would. I don't know, maybe not. Yes?
The city of Syracuse has some kind of stabbing, death, robbery concept. What are you doing to help straighten that up?
It has, over the last, since 4th of July, I think there's been like 10 murders. Yesterday there was 2 stabbings. We provide funding, additional funding for police officers in many of the urban areas, including the city of Syracuse. They execute, or they do their plans, they run how they're going to police and what they're going to do to police. It's difficult, you know, we can't mandate exactly how they use the money other than for police officers or what their policy is. It's difficult from the state level to tell them, well, they got to do this, this, and this. I'm not an expert on law enforcement. They're getting the resources. It's just we've got people on drugs. There's gangs galore, and it was just
You know all that. That's what I'm going to make. What are you doing?
All we can do is get more funding than we've gotten
I'm asking, what are you doing, meeting with the people as their senator in the city of Syracuse and the county of Montgomery to help eliminate them?
As far as meeting with people, people come into my office all the time talking about these issues. I am in the same position as you are, that it's got to stop. But I don't police the city of Syracuse. And there's no way that a senator can make policy on how you use the money. Well, what would you like to say? Do you want me to, what would you like me to do?
I'm saying, why don't you, as a senator, for this county, for this conduct, don't you have some means of meeting those people that run that city?
Oh,
I'm not putting down the police.
No. I do meet with them. I've talked to them all the time. I'm a Republican. Stephanie Miner's a Democrat. I get along better with her than I do with some Republican officials. We always talk. When she needs something, I talk to her about it. I've expressed my point of view to the sheriff, to the police chief, concerning what the hell is going on and what is he doing. He explains it to me, and he says, we're doing this, we're putting more forces out there, we're trying to deal with the gangs, because if it isn't drugs, it's gang-related, and they made a big bust maybe 3-4 weeks ago, and the shootings slowed down anyway, and that was maybe not a result of my discussions with them. Maybe they did that independently. But of course, I've always discussed that with them. And whenever I ask them what I can do, we need some more money. We don't have enough cops. And that's what I try to do as best I can. And I live in the city. There's burglaries within 3 blocks of my house just about once a week. And it concerns me as an individual, as well as a lifelong resident of the city of Syracuse. So I know what you're saying, and I'm doing what I could possibly do. I guess I could run for mayor. That's coming up. I don't think so. But, all right, thank you very much. And again, thank you.